If you've ever been the calm one who absorbs chaos, the quiet one who forgives until something snaps, and when it does, they say you've changed, this is your story. By the end of this, you will understand why certain people trigger your most ruthless boundary, what happens in the moment they cross it, and why this protective mechanism reveals something ancient and irreversible about your nature. There exists within you a threshold that most people never see. It lives quietly, invisibly, beneath your characteristic warmth and your willingness to understand. You move through the world, offering second chances and extending compassion to those who falter, holding space for human imperfection. But beneath this grace runs a line drawn in something harder than stone. It is not announced, it is not negotiated. And when someone crosses it, something shifts in you that can never be undone. This is not anger in the conventional sense. This is not the hot flash of betrayal, or the theatrical withdrawal of affection. This is colder, more final, more absolute. Jung spoke of the shadow not merely as darkness, but as the repository of our fiercest protections, the part of us that knows when mercy has become self-destruction. The INFJ Firewall is precisely this. It is the moment when your intuitive understanding of someone's nature crystallizes into certainty, when their pattern becomes undeniable, when you see not just what they did but what they will always do. And in that crystallization the door closes, not with a slam, but with the quiet finality of a vault ceiling. What makes this boundary so distinctive is its invisibility until the moment of transgression. You do not advertise your limits. You do not issue warnings or draw maps of acceptable behavior. Instead, you observe, you absorb, you give people room to be human. Your natural inclination toward understanding means you make allowances for context, for pain, for the complicated reasons people hurt each other. You see the wounded child beneath the adult transgression. You recognize the defensive patterns born from old trauma. And so you extend patience that others might consider excessive, forgiveness that others might call naive. But you are not naive, you are gathering data. Your intuition is not merely reading the surface interaction, but tracking the deeper pattern, the underlying architecture of someone's character. And while you offer grace upon grace, something in you is also watching, waiting, assessing whether this person's core orientation is toward growth or toward destruction. The firewall does not activate over single mistakes. It activates when the pattern becomes undeniable. When intuition and observation converge on a single devastating conclusion about who someone fundamentally is. The moment of crossing is rarely dramatic in its external presentation. There is no shouting match, no confrontation, no burning of bridges in the theatrical sense. Instead, there is a shift so subtle that the other person may not immediately recognize it. Your voice remains calm. Your demeanor stays composed. But something essential has withdrawn. Where once there was warmth, there is now polite distance. Where once there was investment in the depth of the relationship, there is now only the maintenance of necessary civility. You become cordial in a way that is more devastating than hostility, because it signals complete emotional divestment. The person who crossed the line may sense something has changed, may feel the sudden chill where warmth once lived, but they often cannot pinpoint the exact moment or the exact transgression that triggered this shift. This is because the firewall does not respond to a single incident. It responds to the revealed pattern, to the cumulative weight of evidence that someone is not who they presented themselves to be, or that their presence in your life has become destructive rather than generative. What triggers this mechanism is not mere disappointment or ordinary conflict. Relationships involve friction, people let each other down, misunderstandings occur. The INFJ firewall does not activate over these normal ruptures. Instead, it responds to specific violations that strike at the core of what you hold sacred. Betrayal of trust in its most fundamental form. manipulation that treats your empathy as a weakness to exploit, cruelty that masquerades as honesty, the revelation that someone has been performing intimacy while harboring contempt, the discovery that your vulnerability has been weaponized or shared as entertainment. These are not simple mistakes. These are character revelations. They expose not a moment of weakness but an orientation of spirit, a way of moving through the world that is fundamentally incompatible with your values. When you see this clearly, when your intuition locks onto the truth of someone's nature with absolute certainty, the firewall activates not as punishment but as protection. It is your psyche recognizing a threat to your integrity and sealing the breach. The finality of this boundary confuses people who witness it. They see someone who has been endlessly understanding suddenly become immovable. They interpret this as coldness or rigidity, failing to realize that what looks like sudden harshness is actually the culmination of prolonged observation. Nietzsche wrote of the necessity of learning when to withdraw one's hand, when continued reaching becomes not compassion but complicity in your own diminishment. The INFJ Firewall embodies this principle. It is not cruelty, it is clarity. Once the pattern is seen, once the true nature is understood, there is no unseeing it. Your intuition has delivered its verdict, and that verdict is not subject to appeal. This may appear to be unsympathetic to those who believe in infinite chances, who think that love or connection should persist regardless of behavior. But you understand something they do not. You understand that some patterns cannot change, because they arise not from circumstance but from fundamental character. You understand that continuing to invest in someone who has revealed themselves to be destructive is not kindness, but self-betrayal. There is a particular quality to the space that opens after the firewall activates. It is not filled with lingering anger or the hot embers of resentment. Instead, there is a cool detachment, an emotional neutrality that others find more unsettling than rage would be. You do not hate the person who crossed the line. You simply no longer feel invested in them. They have transitioned from the category of intimate relations to that of distant acquaintances, and this reclassification is permanent. You can be civil, you can be professional if circumstances require it, but the door to your inner world, once closed, does not reopen. This is not because you are unforgiving in the petty sense. It is because you have seen the truth of who they are, and that truth has made intimacy impossible. Jung spoke of the necessity of the shadow's protective function, the way our darker instincts guard the vulnerable parts of ourselves. The firewall is this protection made manifest. It is your shadow saying no on behalf of your wholeness, refusing to allow further harm in the name of understanding. The people who trigger this response often react with shock when they realize what has happened. They may attempt to restore the previous warmth, confused by its sudden absence. They may apologize, explain, or try to minimize the transgression. But they are operating under a misunderstanding. They believe they are dealing with ordinary anger that can be soothed, or ordinary hurt that can be healed. They do not understand that they are confronting something far more fundamental. Your intuition has delivered its assessment of their character, and that assessment is not subject to reversal. No amount of explanation changes what you now know. No performance of remorse alters the pattern you have observed. They crossed a line they did not know existed, and in crossing it, they revealed something about themselves that cannot be unrevealed. The firewall is not a punishment. They can earn their way out of it. It is a boundary that protects your essential self from further erosion. What makes this mechanism so powerful is its absolute nature. Other personality types might maintain grudging contact, allow someone back into a conditional friendship, or keep the door slightly ajar. But when your firewall activates, the closure is complete. There is no ambiguity, no mixed signals, no possibility of restoration. This totality serves a purpose. It prevents the slow bleeding of your energy into relationships that have proven themselves toxic. It stops the cycle of repeated violation and repeated forgiveness, that leads only to your own diminishment. By making the boundary absolute, you protect yourself from the temptation to rationalize your way back into a harmful connection. Your intuition has done its work. It has seen the pattern. And your firewall ensures that you honor what your intuition has revealed rather than talk yourself out of it in the name of giving people chances they have already squandered. The loneliness of this mechanism is real. When you remove people with finality, when you close doors that others would leave perpetually open, you narrow your circle. Each activation of the firewall means one fewer person in your intimate world. Over time, this can create a sense of isolation, a feeling that you are surrounded by distance, even when you are technically connected to many people. But this loneliness is not meaningless. It is the price of integrity. It is what happens when you refuse to compromise your boundaries for the sake of company. The alternative would be to keep people close who have proven themselves untrustworthy, to maintain intimacy with those who treat your vulnerability as a resource to exploit. This would fill the space around you with bodies, but leave you profoundly alone in the ways that matter. The firewall, for all its stark finality, ensures that the people who remain in your inner circle are those who have earned their place, who understand the sacredness of what you offer, who do not mistake your depth for weakness or your empathy for unlimited availability. There is something mythic in this pattern, something that echoes the ancient stories of thresholds that cannot be uncrossed. In Greek mythology, the river Styx flows between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. Once crossed, return is nearly impossible. The INFJ Firewall operates on similar logic. It is a boundary between worlds, between the realm of intimate connection and the realm of permanent distance. Those who cross it thinking they can return, discover too late that the bridge is burned behind them. This is not caprice. This is not arbitrary cruelty. This is the necessary operation of a psyche that has learnt the cost of keeping doors open to those who have proven themselves unworthy of entry. Your depth is not infinite. Your capacity for understanding has limits. And when someone demonstrates through a pattern rather than an isolated incident that they will misuse your trust, your firewall activates to prevent further damage. Understanding this mechanism requires understanding what you are protecting. You do not build walls around nothing. The firewall exists because there is something within you precious enough to defend. Your capacity for deep connection, your ability to see into the hearts of others, and your willingness to hold space for human complexity are rare gifts. They require protection precisely because they are so easily exploited. People who operate from a manipulative or cruel instinct instinctively recognize depth when they encounter it, and some are drawn to it not to honor it, but to use it. They see your empathy and mistake it for weakness. They encounter your understanding and interpret it as permission to transgress without consequence. The firewall exists to correct this misunderstanding. It demonstrates that your warmth is not weakness, that your compassion has boundaries, and that your willingness to understand does not equate to willingness to tolerate abuse. When someone crosses the line, they discover too late that they were not dealing with someone soft but with someone who simply chooses softness until softness becomes self-destruction. The irreversibility of the firewall, once activated, is its defining characteristic. Other boundaries can be renegotiated. Other conflicts can be resolved through communication and changed behavior. However, when your intuition has grasped the fundamental truth of someone's character and found it incompatible with your values, no amount of superficial change alters the underlying reality. They have shown you who they are. Maya Angelou's famous dictum applies here with particular force. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. Your firewall is the mechanism by which you honor this belief. You do not give people endless opportunities to prove that their character is other than what they have revealed it to be. You do not exhaust yourself trying to rehabilitate those who have demonstrated their fundamental orientation toward destruction. Instead, you close the door and direct your precious energy toward relationships that are generative rather than extractive, toward people who understand that depth is sacred and treat it accordingly. Living with this mechanism means accepting that you will be misunderstood. People who operate from different psychological architectures do not comprehend the finality of your boundaries. They project their own experiences onto yours, assuming that with enough time, apology, or changed behavior, the warmth will return. They do not understand that what has changed is not your mood but your understanding. You have seen something about them that cannot be unseen. Your intuition has delivered its verdict, and while you bear them no ill will, while you wish them well in the abstract sense, they have been permanently reclassified. They have moved from the category of intimate to the category of distant, and this reclassification is not temporary. It is not a strategy to inspire change. It is not punishment intended to cause them suffering. It is simply the truthful response of your psyche to what it has witnessed. They have shown you their pattern, and you have adjusted your boundaries accordingly. The power of the firewall lies in its protection of your essential self. Without it, you would be vulnerable to repeated exploitation, to the slow erosion of your boundaries by people who mistake your depth for unlimited tolerance. You would give chances beyond wisdom, extend understanding beyond reason, and maintain connections that drain rather than nourish. The firewall prevents this. It is the mechanism by which your psyche says enough. It is the shadow's gift, the protective instinct that recognizes when mercy has become self-harm. Jung understood that the integration of the shadow does not mean suppressing our protective instincts, but rather learning to honor them, and recognizing when our darker impulses are actually in service of our wholeness. The firewall is precisely this. It is not the opposite of your compassion but its necessary complement. The boundary that ensures your depth is offered only to those who have proven themselves capable of honoring it. If you have felt this pattern in yourself, if you recognize the quiet finality of the closed door, if you have experienced the confusion of others who cannot understand why you will not simply forgive and forget, you are not alone. This is not coldness. This is not cruelty. This is clarity. This is the operation of intuition so refined that it sees patterns where others see isolated incidents, so developed that it recognizes character revelation in what others dismiss as momentary lapses. Your firewall is not evidence of your inability to forgive. It is evidence of your wisdom and understanding that some patterns cannot change because they arise from a fundamental orientation rather than temporary circumstances. It is your psyche's way of ensuring that your precious gifts of depth and empathy are directed toward those who will honor them rather than exploit them. The loneliness this creates is real, but it is the loneliness of integrity, the necessary solitude that comes from refusing to compromise your boundaries for the sake of comfort and company. You have chosen wholeness over connection, truth over convenience, and in this choice, you embody something ancient and necessary about the nature of boundaries and the protection of the self. The INFJ firewall is not a flaw to be corrected, but a feature to be understood. It is the line in the sand that says your depth has limits, your understanding has boundaries, and your compassion requires reciprocity rather than exploitation. When someone crosses it, they do not encounter rage, drama, or the theatrical withdrawal of affection. They encounter something far more final. They encounter the truth that some doors, once closed, do not reopen, not because you are unforgiving but because you have seen clearly and acted accordingly. This is not the opposite of love. This is love's necessary boundary, the edge that protects what is sacred from those who would desecrate it. And in honoring this boundary, in allowing your firewall to operate when wisdom demands it, you protect not just yourself, but the integrity of the gifts you bring to the world. If this resonates with you, if you have felt the weight of doors closing and wondered whether you were too harsh, too final, too unforgiving, let me assure you that you are not. Your firewall is not cruelty. It is clarity. It is the wisdom of intuition operating at its highest level, protecting your essential self from those who have proven themselves unworthy of access to it. You do not owe endless chances to those who have shown you their pattern. You do not owe intimacy to those who have misused it. Your boundaries are valid. Your finality is justified. And the loneliness it creates, while real, is vastly preferable to the soul-deep erosion that comes from keeping doors open to those who should have been shown the exit long ago. Share your experiences in the comments below. Have you felt this mechanism activate in your own life? Do you recognize the quiet finality of the closed door? You are not alone in this. There are others who understand the necessity of absolute boundaries, who know that sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do is refuse further access to those who have proven themselves destructive. Subscribe to continue exploring these patterns with others who understand that depth requires protection, that empathy has edges, and that the firewall is not our failure, but our wisdom made manifest. If this spoke to something deep inside you, that quiet strength, that invisible threshold only you understand, you're not alone. The INFJ Firewall isn't a weakness, it's an awakening. It means you've loved deeply enough to learn discernment. I'd love to hear your story, the moment you drew your line, the moment you chose peace over people-pleasing. Please share it in the comments, so others know they're not the only ones who've walked through the fire and risen wiser. Subscribe if you want more mythic psychology, stories that explain the unseen patterns shaping who you are and who you're becoming. Together, we'll keep the light sacred.